This video covers some of the audio examples referred to in an article I've just written entitled Power Tips to Make Drums Stand Out. And really it's just a random collection of before and after audio examples using some of the plugins that I've referred to in the article. These are plugins that I use all the time and they are my favorite plugins. And when it comes to processing drum sounds and particularly drum beats, I think these plugins really stand out on their own. So I'll start off with the first and simplest example, which is parallel compression. Now I'm sure you've heard of parallel compression or New York compression. In fact, parallel any process entails taking the dry unaffected signal, duplicating it, processing the copied signal, and mixing it back with the dry signal. This is called parallel processing. Now, whether it's a compressor or an equalizer or distortion, it really doesn't matter. It's the process we're concentrating on, which is the parallel process. Nowadays, however, a lot of plugins afford that parallel processing within the plugin, and they do this using a mix function. And the mix function simply mixes the dry unaffected signal with the wet process signal. So I'll start off with parallel compression, and I'm going to use Waves Hybrid Compressor. And this is probably one of my top 3 favorite compressors when it comes to making drum beats just stand out, just to get the drum elements within the beat to pop out. It's great for making things snap, great for making things sound clearer, and just basically more vibrant. Have a listen to this, and I'll drop in and out of the compressor so you can hear what it's doing to the drum beat. It's wonderful. It's making the kick pop. It's making the snare stand out and sizzle. It's brought all the hi-hats in, and yet it hasn't made things sound two-dimensional. It's a really, really good plugin for processing drum beats. I love it. I'm now going to move on to distortion, and I'm using FabFilter's Saturn 2 distortion plugin. I absolutely adore this plugin. What I want you to concentrate on is the three-dimensional deep effect that this plugin imparts on this particular drum beat. So I'll start in bypass and then I'll drop it in. I have made things distort quite a bit because I wanted this sort of metallic flavor to the drum beat. It's wonderful for coloring really boring sounds. So you can hear that drum beat's quite muffled. It's got very little separation and no real depth. Huge difference. And all I've really done is just split the drum beat into 3 distinct frequency bands, and I processed each one with a different topology. It's gorgeous. It really is one of the best distortion plugins out there, not just because of what it can achieve in terms of the topologies here, but also what you can do in terms of the modulation matrix. Very, very musical and very creative. It's a sound design tool and not just a mix production tool. Next up, I'm using one of my go-to plugins, and this is a plugin I use all the time. It's Boss Digital's Transgressor 2. Now, this plugin is very, very simple. It's a transient detection plugin that detects the transients and the body and separates them into 2 distinct parts. You can then EQ each part separately, i.e. in isolation. You can shape and apply performance functions as well. And it really is in a league of its own when it comes to highlighting very specific drum elements within a drum beat. Now, remember, all of these plugins can be used on any sound sources, but because this article's about drum beats, I'm going to stick with drum beats. So what I've done with this plugin is to just highlight the different drum elements within this drum beat without distorting the individual drum elements. So there's no coloration as such. It's more about clarity and precision. So have a listen in bypass, and then I'll drop it in here and there so you can hear what a huge difference it makes to the overall sound. So it hasn't colored anything. It's made the kick pop out, the snare sound nice and crispy. It's brought all the other percussive elements into it. It's kept the depth element going quite well. With the next example, I'm going to concentrate on clipping. Now, there are loads of good clippers out there, loads. I've mentioned quite a few of them in the article, but this one is one of my favorites. It's made by Acustica Audio and it's called the Gainstation. If you have a look at this plugin, it is very well thought out. It's quite a musical plugin as opposed to sort of precision control over sounds. It's got the pre-section, it's got a section that deals with the low frequencies, it's got the air function, it's got the spread. You can change the routing options here, etc., etc. But what I'm using it for is just clipping. And what I like about this particular clipper, which is this section of the plugin, is that it's got all these different modes. And each mode takes the clipper from soft to hard and applies different types of dynamic behavior across the clipping function. So have a listen to what it's done to this drum beat. Again, I'll play it in bypass and then bring it in here and there. So it's highlighted all the drum elements within that beat, but it's kept the depth going. For me, a lot of these plugins, the poorer ones, tend to smear frequencies and you end up losing either clarity, separation, and more often than not, depth. This is well thought out. It's maintained the depth. In fact, all the plugins I've used here haven't compromised the depth of the beats. If anything, they've added to them. A very good clipper, but it's not just a clipper, it does other things. So do yourself a favor and go and attack this plugin. You'll love it, seriously. In this example, I'm using the granddaddy of them all, the plugin, or rather the process that started it all off, which is SPL's Transient Designer. Now, I had the hardware version of this plugin, and I was using it decades ago to suck reverbs of samples that I was processing, to add punch to drum beats, to specific sounds, to make snares cut through, to make kicks sound big. It does so much with such little effort. Literally, this is it. This entire plugin is this. But listen to what it's done to this particular drum beat that you're going to be familiar with and how it's highlighted all the drum elements within the beat just by using these two knobs. Everything sounds crispier and everything's jumping out. The drum beats suddenly become very exciting. It's maintained the depth of the kick drum, but it's just highlighted everything else beautifully. It's a lovely, lovely plugin, and it can go from extreme to gentle to anything you want. It's incredibly well thought out and highly musical. In this example, I'm using a plugin made by Sonible called Entropy Q+. Now, this plugin is quite different to all the other ones I'm using here, in that what this plugin does, and let me just drop this back out to default and show you very simply. This plugin literally works with two things in mind. One, if you have entropy that goes positive, it heads towards detecting and processing transients. But when you take entropy into negative, you'd think that it's only highlighting the sustained element of the drum beat or whatever sound you're processing with entropy, but it does more than that. It generates harmonics. So you can appreciate what a tool this is for sounds like pianos, guitars, vocals, etc. Now, you're not forced to use it in wideband mode. You can use combination of entropy and equalization on each band individually. So I'll just load up the preset that I created for this particular drum beat and listen to what it does to the drum beat. It's made everything sound clearer, deeper, and actually has taken those muffled sounds and brightened them. So do yourself a favor and get this plugin. You'll find lots and lots of uses for it. Finally, in this particular video, we come to Klanghelm's SDRR. You can do so much with this plugin. It's so so well thought out. You can generate harmonics, you can do bit crushing, you can use a ton of different topologies, you can lower sample rate and grunge things up. You can do anything with this plugin. You can overdrive sounds, you can have very subtle distortion to manic stuff. What I've done here is to take a really boring drum beat and more than anything to highlight very specific sections of it, but again to give this deep three-dimensional effect. Have a listen to it. It's really clever in how it processes sounds. So not too exciting. And suddenly you can hear all the drum elements within the drum beat as separate individual components. And more than all the other plugins, this gives a sense of space. It gives this sort of airy effect to the sounds. And that really comes across beautifully when you're processing drum beats, because quite often you find that when you process drum beats, especially when it comes to distortion, you run out of headroom. This thing just magically gives it this air, this light spatial feeling to the drum beat. Have a listen again. I love it. Gorgeous. Right, that's pretty much it. I hope this video has been useful to you. It's really to give you a taste of the different types of processes that can be used to just make drums stand out a bit more. Whether you want manic coloring or whether you just want to highlight specific frequencies, all of these plugins do a great job.